If you go to the Bundesliga, one of the more interesting stories, I think, Andy, in the European football scene at the moment is Borussia Dortmund. You know, at the beginning of the season, they were all over the place and they seem to have sneaked up. That something's working for them. They've won 3 out of their last 4 matches, drawn 1, and they're comfortably in a place now close to the top of the Bundesliga to at least compete for the Champions League next season.
Yeah, that's right. And it looked like a complete write-off a month ago, Dotun. You know, they looked as if they wouldn't make Europe, let alone the Champions League. Whereas now they're still in 7th place, but they're 4 points behind RB Leipzig in 4th, who are not looking unbreachable, is fair to say. Now, of course, there's some traffic in between, but you're right to underline those 4 games recently because the 3 wins have been over direct rivals for those European places. So Mainz, Freiburg, now Borussia Mönchengladbach last weekend. The draw that you referenced was away to Bayern. And the Allianz Arena has been an absolute house of horrors for them. And weirdly, as they've had 2 very poor league seasons in a row. Remember, they finished 5th, and it was only because the Bundesliga was one of the recipients of the extra place last season that they were able, the finalists were able to get back into the competition for this season, which is pretty remarkable, really. In those 2 dreadful seasons, they've not lost away at Bayern in either of them, which is weird. It's a win and a draw, having taken so many thrashings when it counted and when they were challenging at the top, but I think the feeling you're getting recently with those 4 league games, where they're not just good results, but they're controlled performances. And controlled performances that have been like a stranger to Borussia Dortmund for most of this season. It's all been so chaotic, but it's all been so chaotic for such a long time. Now, you had that rearing its head slightly when they were absolutely thumped in the away leg of the Champions League at Barcelona. And I think in isolation, it's easy to cast that off and say, oh, well, you know, Barcelona are amazing. You can lose 4-0 away to them. But the nature of the performance, how frantic it was, the fact that actually they had plenty of chances to score and more than enough chances to take something back for the second leg. Of course, they ended up playing brilliantly in the second leg, as we referenced last week, against Barcelona, and they could have taken it into extra time. That they were absolutely all over Barcelona in that second leg, which I think again feeds into the good form that they have at the moment. But I think the Barcelona game being in the middle of that, the Barcelona away game where they got thrashed, being in the middle of that good run in the league, tells us 2 things about the effect that Niko Kovač is having. Now, look, we've said it before. He doesn't seem the most obvious Borussia Dortmund coach. He's disciplined, belt and braces, almost an antithesis to that sort of excitement that we think that Dortmund fans all want. Or maybe, you know, sometimes they like a nice cup of tea or a hot chocolate rather than just another tequila all the time. But I think you're seeing the Kovač effect, which didn't seem to be there, as Lars said a couple of weeks ago at the beginning. It didn't seem as if he was having any effect at all because the problems at Dortmund were so deep-rooted. It is having an effect because you can see the team playing a bit more like the Niko Kovač team. And like I said, the fact that the thrashing at Barcelona is in the middle of that is quite important because it's another moment where Kovač says to some of the biggest players in the team, I'm not taking this shit off you. You mess with me and you're going to be out on your ass. And, you know, he refits the team as he sees fit. And at the end of it, if that means, even though he's wearing the number 10 shirt these days, leaving Julian Brandt on the bench, fine. I don't care how much you earn. I'm going to leave you on the bench. If it means leaving out Jamie Gittins, fine. I'm going to leave you on the bench. You know, his way of looking at things is so merit-based. There's a lot of ways you could criticise Kovač as a coach, but even though he isn't a typical Dortmund coach, as we might have hinted at before, he's probably the coach that Dortmund need at the moment. And whether this mini run leads them to where they want to, and whether it leads them into the top 4, or whether it keeps going, whatever, of course, is dependent on other teams' results as well.
Is it the discipline that has made the difference? Is that the secret?
I think so.
I wonder if it's I think the discipline is almost like a manifestation of it rather than like the totality of it. I think that Kovač, with his strengths and weaknesses that he clearly has, and I don't think anyone thinks he's this spellbinding tactician who's got levels to go to beyond anyone else. I think the one thing he maybe does have is clarity in his own thinking, and I think clarity is almost what's needed right now.
Dortmund have lacked that, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that he sort of has talked about actually why he sees things improving, saying when you first come in, you've got everyone needs to process, everyone needs to understand what's changed with what's happening. But once everyone's done that, that's when you start to see the improvement. Everyone's actually pulling in the same direction. And I think it's almost like the analogy that came into my head, and this is probably too much of a personal analogy, I don't know, but when I'm very busy and I'm working very hard, I can stop paying attention to stuff around me. I get cluttered and my space gets messy and all the rest of it. And sometimes you need to stop and put everything back in order. And then you can get back to thinking clearly because everything around you getting cluttered starts to make your vision cluttered.
Tidy desk is a tidy mind and all that.
Sometimes, yeah. And I feel like it's almost like this is what Dortmund needed, is someone just to come in and just tidy the place first. And once everything's been tidied up, then we can all start going in a direction. And that doesn't mean that's the person who can lead you to your ultimate goal, but maybe you really needed someone to come in and do that, and I think that feels like what he's been doing.
Yeah, I think that idea of bridging towards the future is quite a convincing one. I mean, they've had issues with recruitment, with squad construction. They've spent a lot of money in recent times, and a lot of those signings just haven't looked like working out at all. And you can look down the years. We've talked time and again how there are too many voices upstairs at Dortmund. So it's not just been the coach's fault, and it's not just been the players' fault. But funnily enough, the reason that I think they've succeeded in the Champions League over the last couple of years is because they have got high quality individuals that can create little spells of momentum and can turn up at big moments. But whether those are the right sort of players to click together in a more pleasing puzzle and get you through a successful league campaign, I think is a completely different question. And I think we've seen that time and again. Obviously, he has to create an environment, and this is where I think he's useful, almost as like the executioner of like all the not very joined up thinking of the past. So what he will have to do, like he probably won't be the person who wins the Bundesliga for Dortmund. And I don't think he will stay there for the next 3 or 4 years.
He's got another season there though.
Yeah, it won't be next season, trust me. I think really what he needs to do, because that squad, as Nicky says, needs a total spring clean. He is going to have to get rid of some big earners. And he's prepared to do that. And there are other players he'll platform and give an opportunity to take themselves up to the next level. And he needs to do that. He needs to find, and Dortmund need to do that, to find that sort of focus. And he is someone who won't mind getting his hands dirty doing that. And I think the board will let him do it. I think there have been so many dawns and false dawns. And yes, we're going to rebuild. Well, Stuttgart finished second in the league, so let's go out and get Waldemar Anton and Seru Guirassy. Of course, Guirassy has been independently brilliant. Anton, not so much. But really, they've been thrown into an environment where for them to become the glue of something sustainable hasn't really been possible. And that's what he has to help change.
But the shadow, as we all know, of Jurgen Klopp still hangs over Dortmund to a certain extent, doesn't it?
Ideologically, at least.
Yeah. And I wonder how much Kovač is going to be able to shift that shadow.
Yeah, he's not.
However long
he doesn't
he's got
scream
there.
heavy metal football, does he? He's not that energy. I think one of the other things that you said that I thought was sort of interesting was this idea of you can't have 10 big personalities, but you do need 3 or 4 big personalities to be your amplifiers, to be the ones who will spread your message and make it dig in. And I think that again, to me, speaks to a general, let's pare this down, let's get some structure back in place. And I think that it almost behoves all of those people at the top of Dortmund who have, as Andy said, been not always pulling in the same direction, to let him be the person who does that and simplifies things for them, because that way it's responsibility taken out of their own hands. It's allowing someone else to just do that ordering. And then I don't see that anyone's going to want to interrupt that, no matter the shadows that hang over the club, because it allows them a way out of a mess, basically. The question I have in my mind is more, how much leeway will he have to rebuild rather than just strip down? I mean, there's players there even at the moment like Chukwuemeka. The question of whether or not they're going to want to spend the money to make that move permanent.
The first thing I would do with that team, obviously on the back of quite a small sample size, bin Brandt and bring in Chukwuemeka. He has like offered them a new dimension since he's been in. Now, I know there's the question of cost, which presumably they could negotiate, fitness, all those sort of things. But what Kovač wants is athletic and ability to take responsibility. And Chukwuemeka is both of those things. And Brandt, for not entirely reasons within his control, but nevertheless, this is the case, he's just not at it anymore, and could probably do with a fresh start anywhere else and somewhere else. And like you said, the difference between just chopping and rebuilding, they're kind of related, aren't they? And it goes back to what we said about, we still have this image, a little bit like we have this image of, the original Atletico under Diego Simeone about, it's 11 men behind the ball. And because of that Dortmund side under Klopp, we still have this image of, they develop young players and, it's all done on a shoestring. It's not. They've got an absolutely enormous wage bill, and some of those are going to have to go. And that's always the hardest part of modern football, isn't it? Getting rid of the big earning players that you don't want anymore, which is not a given.
Also, just on the identity thing, I always think, yes, in the long run, in the big picture, as Andy said, aspiring to win something, you might want to come back towards that Klopp-style identity. But there is not one football team anywhere that would rather be seventh with a manager who's giving you a particular style than would rather be second with a team that's playing any kind of football, really.